This is the slides of the opium den. So later everyone's invited. As soon as you hit the pool down there, you climb out, get your opium back, set for the evening. All right. So yeah, introducing Charlie Haas, who screenwriter, essayist, and novelist. His novel, The Enthusiast, came out quite a number of years ago. What, 7, 8 years ago?
More, even more.
So anyway, a few years ago. And now this one, and I read it cover to cover, and I was totally charmed and wonderful. It was just what I wanted to read. And so I'm pleased y'all came out to hear and read from it and talk about it. And yeah, enjoy yourselves. We're going till 8 o'clock here with this. Music at 8:30 if anybody wants to rush back from the bar. It's going to be a great band. Okay, here comes the guitarist right here. You can applaud him on his way. Yeah, Jim Contalando there. Okay, he'll be back for an 8:30 show. All right, Charlie, you ready?
I am.
I think you're streaming to the world, but wait till I really get back there and
Okay.
look at the thing to make sure it's true. Because I don't always tell the truth about this.
This call is being recorded for
Training. You're going to train me with this.
So, yeah, we're recording there. We're streaming here. Everything's good with the world. All right, Charlie Haas.
I would like to start by thanking all of you for coming out in this rotten weather and being here. It means a lot to me, and I appreciate all of you very much. And I also want to thank Eric and this wonderful bookstore/music venue, Bird and Beckett, for having me here. I am thrilled to be here, and thanks Joshua Brody for making this connection. Appreciate it. So about this book, The Current Fantasy. It's 1914. A group of bohemian dropouts are living around a lake in the German countryside. And these people have long hair and feathers and whimsical clothing. They look like they got the call to be hippies and showed up 50 years early. They're variously excited about expressionist art and poetry, anarchism, free love, naked farming, the ancient religion of sun worship, and the modern religion of psychoanalysis. And they've come to this lake to get away from cities, electricity, patriarchy, and war. And as it becomes clear that Germany is determined to go to war against most of Europe, these guys decide to go to California, which people call the America of America, where they can get away with living their way and being left alone, or so they believe. And they come to San Bernardino County, where they make a little utopia called Sunland. There's a working class family of 4 from Berlin who follow them there, Anna and Gerhard, and their adolescent kids, Lily and Benji. And our story is told from the perspectives of those 4 characters. So I'm going to read a few passages from the point of view of each one of those 4. Here's Anna, the mom. She's a lapsed classical violinist. She works behind the counter of an Aschinger's cafeteria, which is kind of the McDonald's of Berlin at that time. And she's terrified of the war that everyone knows is going to start any day. In this scene, Anna goes to pick up her daughter Lily, who's 11, at a music store. And to me, this has always been the scene where the 19th century gives way to the 20th. Anna gets off the streetcar at Leipziger Platz and goes to the music store, where she told Lily to wait for her. That music smell, wood and rosin, gathers her inside, welcoming and scolding all at once. Lily's standing with her back to Anna and her head down in the horn of a gramophone, her pink and blonde reflection in the lacquer looking like a grown woman's. Anna goes behind a grand piano whose raised lid almost hides her from view. A clerk puts a record on the gramophone and Brahms' Violin Concerto begins. Anna used to play this in audition, almost well enough to be called back. And she knows the story in it, whether Brahms did or not. For 90 measures, the orchestra paces the floor, waiting up late. When the violin comes in, you see what they're worried about. She's a teenage mess, anguished from her first notes. I love beauty, but it hurts me worse than anything, the violin says. I want to know nature and bodies. I want to meet the dispossessed. I want to run naked in the woods and let the rain paste petals to my skin. I want runes on my back and Chinese letters on my bathtub. I want to try morphine and, you want church, the orchestra shouts. So much church. I'm a violin, the violin says. Next time, give birth to a glockenspiel. The orchestra gives orders. The violin makes scenes. It's a wonder they get through the movement without killing each other. The soloist on the record plays it perfectly, stringing the double and triple stops together till Anna's arms cramp. As the clerk changes records, Lily looks more serious than Anna can remember seeing her. A few discs later, the second movement starts. Woodwinds, mediating like aunts and uncles, introduce the violin to a nice French horn. Nothing comes of it, but then, out of nowhere, the oboe. He pulls the violin into a duet, his deep breaths and her long bowings. The orchestra stops storming and mumbles behind them, barely a chaperone. Anna was 13 the first time she heard this. They'd had her playing Bach. That was the joy, but this was the desiring. Lily listens with her mouth open and eyes wide. The final movement starts, that Hungarian tune that makes everything suddenly happy. Anna's never trusted it. Neither does the violin, with a minor passage like a drowning person's last shout. That's it? One dance around a wedding hall and life is settled? Exactly, the orchestra says. Champagne, stay in touch. That's why they're so happy. She's someone else's problem now. But Lily is still staring into the music. She's 11, Anna thinks. Too old to start, but who cares? We'd get her a child-sized violin, and she and I can play together. Wherever we need to go, we'll have that. The needle clicks on the record's last spiral. Anna waits till the clerk takes it away, then goes over to Lily, puts a hand on her shoulder, leans down and says, "Do you think you'd like a violin?" Lily looks at her as if she's crazy. "A gramophone," she says. Thank you. So Anna and her family meet these Sunland people and go to California with them. On the ship from New York to Los Angeles, Anna joins their string quartet. They're going to play Dvorak's American Quartet in honor of their new country, but the rehearsals are not going well. Anna has prayed the bad artist's rosary 1,000 times. It's all right. I wasn't born with what the good ones have. It's out of my hands. And really, it's enough to be anywhere near this art that's given me such happiness. It would be enough to be a bug on the windshield of an automobile parked 3 blocks from a concert hall where the program tonight is a lecture on phrenology, but there was an evening of Liszt 3 weeks ago. That's all I need. But as many times as you pray it, you backslide, thinking something will change you. And that's why, like an idiot, she said she would do this. But they make it through the Dvorak and they get to California. And this is them landing in LA. They take their luggage from the dock and follow a paved path through a rail yard to the foot of a beautiful hillside town. White walls, red roofs, and palm trees climb the avenues. The haze gives way to gold sun and the smells of flowers and breakfast. An arch over the widest street says, San Pedro, Port of Los Angeles. They cross the road. Even the modest houses are beautiful. Who gets to live like this, Anna thinks. Workday hedonists who retire to California every time they come home. They walk to a streetcar stop and put their things down under a mimosa tree full of pink blossoms. Anna can't believe she worried so much about the Dvorak. That worry belongs back in Europe with rust and verdigris and flat wailing people in medieval paintings. Not here in the light that falls on Renaissance lambs. Just look how happy everyone is to see it. Astrid and her sun worshippers most of all, like Catholics meeting Jesus without having to die. Now here's Gerhard, Anna's husband. When we meet Gerhard in Berlin, he works in a telephone factory. He's a follower of Rosa Luxemburg. He believes in electricity and socialism, and he has no interest in these crazy arty people Anna introduces him to. But then he meets Rose, a painter from Munich, who beguiles everyone in our little family, each in a different way. After the visit where he meets Rose, they start exchanging letters. And this is Gerhard on the streetcar to work, writing to her. Dear Rose, thank you for your letter, with its kind words and fine drawings. About your question. When I first came to Berlin, I worked in construction, but my interest in electricity came earlier, when I was a boy and saw a light bulb. The man whose store it was in explained it to me after a fashion. Till then, I thought the world was mud, manure, and weeds. Imagine learning that there was lightning in all of it. In Berlin, I found work on an apartment building in Wilmersdorf. The electricians kept failing to show up, so I did some wiring myself. When the city regulator came, I was afraid he'd tear it out. Instead, he told me that he and 3 friends were starting a new business and asked me to join them. His name was Kessler. He and a colleague named Brewer had an ingenious design for small dynamos, and that was to be just the beginning. Brewer had a scheme for sending pictures over the telephone using piano rolls and lemon-tipped paper. Kessler had plans for cinema in people's houses, using pipes like those for water, but with mirrors and lenses to propel the images. Our dynamos enjoyed good sales. We worked 12 hours a day, but we believed that in the future, with the shackles of time and distance dissolved by these inventions, people would do a minimum of labor and spend their remaining time in parks, cafes, museums, and beds. He crosses out "and beds," then writes it in again. Then Werner Siemens and Stromberg Carlson brought out dynamos with slightly different designs from ours, undercut our prices, and hired Brewer and Kessler, but not me. This was an education, though not the sort I was hoping for. A month later, I found a job at Dreyer Telephone, a factory as hot as Egypt and as loud as if all the phone calls in Germany had backed up to their source. I started out standing at an assembly table between 2 Silesian women. A telephone is 2 wires, as simple as shoveling, but in 15 minutes, I was 3 pieces behind. In time, I realized that the Silesian women were a kind of genius, and that Brewer and Kessler were a kind of moron, because time and distance are with us always, bearing down with a special heaviness in telephone factories. I see that this is more than you asked for, but one thing leads to another, at least in one's early years. Fondly, Gerhard. So this correspondence goes on for a while. This correspondence goes on for a while to the point that Gerhard feels guilty about it. And here he's thinking, who tells his history this way and looks for mail at work every morning? It's ridiculous. And yet, isn't this just the shock to the system Rosa Luxemburg talks about? That we, the milked dry workers, have dared to start thinking about our happiness the way the bourgeoisie do. And what if happiness consists in having a story, which of all things turns out to be touching? The sorrows of young Gerhard, Gerhard's adventures underground, even Gerhard Agonistes, but not yet Twilight of the Gerhards. How do you stop such a force? It's like having the streetcar you're writing your letters on hit you from behind and push you straight across Berlin. Then the family is invited to join Rose and the others in California, and they go. At Sunland, Anna switches from violin to fiddle and joins a band that plays Sunday concerts, where the Sunland people wear crazy costumes and there are burning sculptures and big crowds come from LA to see it all. Gerhard is in charge of construction. The county road that goes past the place gets paved, and curious people keep parking and wandering onto the property during the week. The Sunlanders have to figure out how to contain these people, and Gerhard finds himself building a gift shop down by the road. Meanwhile, he finally makes a move on Rose, the same week that Rosa Luxemburg's dream of revolution in Europe comes true. One morning by the spool table, Gerhard puts a hand on Rose's shoulder, moves close, and tries to kiss her. She turns her head, puts it against his, and pats his temple. "No," he says. "I'm afraid not. Rose says, but one should always ask. There might be something there. He lets go of her and walks up the hill. 2 hours later, he finds himself acres away, staring up at the granary with no idea how he got there. I should be relieved, he thinks. I was going to be sick of myself one way or another, and now I am. I wasn't mistaken, not exactly. She cares for me, but they have ways and ways of doing that here. It's one of their crafts. In the week that follows, he's finally a full citizen of Sunland, poetically sad and mechanically useless. Talking to his family is like mining syllables out of the ground. On the 8th night, he finally gets some sleep, wakes up at dawn, and reaches for Anna, but she's left to bake bread. It's life, he thinks. It was never going to grow wings and turn into something else. He goes outside. Last night's rain steams off the houses, and a starling watches him brush his teeth. At the dining hall, he eats breakfast, smiles at Rose and Anna both, walks out onto the porch and almost knocks into Jules, who's back from town with 2 days' issues of the Los Angeles Times. He gives them to Gerhardt. The first one announces, "Revolutionists rule in Russia. Tsar abdicates." After an almost bloodless revolution, developing unexpectedly out of the shortage of bread in Petrograd, it looks as if the Russian people are acquiring rights beyond their wildest dreams. The red flag of revolt is everywhere. Gerhardt sits in a chair, puts his coffee down, and opens the second paper. Germany is next, all signs indicate. Unrest is increasing in Kaiser's dominion. It is more than probable, was the opinion expressed today, that the world stands upon the verge of a collapse of absolutism in Germany as well as in Russia. Every king in Europe trembles at the din of the mobs of Petrograd. Gerhard closes his eyes and sees marchers, trash fires, and fists rocking the gates of the Reichstag till the chains come loose. I should be there, he thinks. Then he sees steerage on the ships, seasick travelers, and the gnats of Panama. When he opens his eyes, there's a prism on his coffee and blue sky over the hills. I'm not going, he thinks. Imagine that. I walked out of my life and lived this one instead. I don't get Rose or the barricades. I get the affection of these weedy people I'm nice to. Revolutions are everywhere. Benji has muscles. Lily has breasts. But mine was over before it started. Rosa, comrades, I built a gift store. Now we have Anna and Gerhard's son, Benji. Benji does not at all like being dragged around the world to California. He wants to go back to Germany and get in on the ground floor of the exciting new technology, radio broadcasting. And between Benji and his father, Gerhard, there's a real thwarted love thing going on, that yearning where there's something in the way. So here's the young teenage Benji in the summer of 1914, finding an engineering project that Gerhard will let him do, even though Sunland doesn't use electricity or steam or anything else that Benji's interested in. In July, Benji and Jules cut logs into planks at the saw pit. Benji stands in a hole like a grave and holds one end of the saw, while Jules stands on the ground, holding the other. By afternoon, Benji prays that Jules will ask to stop, knowing that Jules is praying the same about him, but that neither one of them will. After supper, he finds his father at the spool table and says, I want to build a sawmill. Father looks up. It's machinery, but it's water-powered, Benji says. Water's permitted, isn't it? Yes, Father says. Are these rules written down someplace? Watch yourself. I meant it, Benji says. I want to know. Father puts his pencil down. Sawmills are complicated. There's a book at the farm supply, Benji says. The gearing's expensive. We'd save months of people sawing. Father thinks. All right, he says, you can try. So Benji and two other guys dig a mill pond and build a dam. They line the trench with clay and build the dam on top of it, a wall of wood and concrete with an iron sluice gate. When Benji tells Father it's finished, Father says, "That's the easy part." "I'd like to work on buildings till we get the mill running," Benji says. "After that, I'm going back to Berlin." Father looks at him. "What will you do there?" "Finish school, and then I'm thinking of radio." "For ships?" "For houses," Benji says. "You turn a switch and there are symphonies, lectures, anything you like from all over the world." "Of course there are," Father says. "Or why not cinema right in your home? My friends and I used to talk about that all the time. And opera transmitted through the streetcar lines. It was all going to happen." "I know," Benji says. Then the rains come, the pond fills up, and Benji sends off to Denver for the parts and starts building the sawmill assembly. And Gerhard is right. It takes weeks of struggle for Benji to build this thing. The plans don't work, parts get ruined, Benji gets injured, and then finally, one morning he gets an idea, goes into the mill house, switches 2 gears and throws the lever. The wheels turn like watchworks, nothing touching where it shouldn't. He runs upstairs, the saw blades flying up and down like a needle in a sewing machine. The noise is beautiful, a smack that shakes the floors once every second. When he shuts it off, the calm is absolute. Outside, the leaves stand against the sky in outlines sharper than he's ever seen, a sudden ease overtaking everything. He finds Ralph and Herman. They carry a log to the mill, put it on the rails, and start it going. A minute later, there are 2 clean lengths of pine and a smell like burned syrup. Father comes at midday, stands in the doorway watching, and leaves without saying a word. All right, Benji thinks, I don't need him to like it. But a few minutes later, Father comes back, carrying the 2-man saw from the saw pit. For a minute, Benji thinks Father wants a contest, man against machine. But then Father takes a hammer from his belt and nails the old saw to the wall through its blade. That could be taken in different ways, Benji thinks. From always remember how hard the first year was, to we can go back to this when that breaks. It might even mean the unlikely, but not impossible. Look what my son has done for us. After the war, Benji starts back to Germany to work in radio, but he stops in New York on the way and gets a job with the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company of America. His boss Morris starts letting Benji wire, just as the Marconi Company changes its name to the Radio Corporation of America and joins with Westinghouse to sell people radios for their houses. The first time Benji hears music on a tube-amplified set in 1920, the leap in quality from crystal makes him stand at attention. Yes, they're ducky, Morris says, but no one's buying the damn things. That's why we're going to Pittsburgh in November. What's in Pittsburgh? Benji says. A commercial broadcast, the presidential election. Anyone with a radio will know who wins before the newspapers go to press. And you're going there? You are too. You're the potentiometer man. Play some handball, get that wrist built up. That night, Benji writes to Mother and Father, plans for Berlin set aside. Whatever might happen to me in the future, I'm writing you today from exactly where I want to be. He and Morris drive through sleeting rain to Pittsburgh 3 days before the broadcast. In the radio shack on the roof of the Westinghouse building, they meet 2 other engineers and a man named Leo Rosenberg, who's going to read the election results on the air. On the night of the broadcast, Benji's job is to watch 1 meter and adjust 1 dial for 6 hours. He tries to shut out Leo's voice until he realizes that listening to him makes it easier to concentrate, not harder. Okay, Leo tells the listeners. That's 16 million votes so far for Harding and 9 million for the Democrat Cox. Now, in a minute or two, we'll be getting to the state results, but first, there's something we'd like you to do. If you're hearing this broadcast, do us a favor. Drop a card in the mail and let us know. That's KDKA, Westinghouse, East Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay, then, let's take a look here. At 5 a.m, they finish the broadcast and go back to their hotel. Benji sleeps for 3 hours before Morris knocks on his door. We're going downtown, Morris says. The 5 of them drive to Smithfield Street, park across from a home furnishing store, and wait. In half an hour, a man comes out carrying a wooden box with dials on the front, glass tubes on top, and a headset. "That was us, sir," Morris says. "We sold you that." 20 minutes later, there's another one. Everyone cheers except Leo, who's fallen back to sleep. Benji's still getting over his surprise from last night. He thought an election announcer would sound official, like a government spokesman. But Leo wasn't that way at all. He said, "Okay," and "do us a favor," and cleared his throat right into the microphone. It's not lectures and plays at the touch of a dial we're selling, Benji thinks. It's company. Take the loneliest place you can think of, that Kansas prairie I saw from the train. No, even lonelier, my apartment. There's an iron bed and flowered wallpaper, an occasional voice from the street, but mostly silence. Add in some thoughts of Rose, then Jorgen, and there are nights that last 20 hours. But soon there'll be someone like Leo, the friend you never knew you had, but now can't do without. We should go back to our hotel and phone in to RCA. We should tell them to start making those new sets now and never stop. And now here's Benji's sister, Lily, who's always seemed to me to be the most American character in this book. She's an American before she even sees the place. She loves novelty in everything: clothes, products, music, beliefs. She falls in love with them hard before she turns against them even harder. She loves Sunland for a long time. She loves going to the sun worship ceremony in the morning and working with the mules. But then events take a turn. She runs away to Los Angeles, where she rents a room and finds a job in a factory, standing at an assembly table, cutting rubber mats in half so that they can go into machines that the factory makes. Here she is at the end of her first day of work. When the bell rings at 6, she finishes a cut, looks up and sees people streaming out the doors. She walks to the back of the room where the parts from the table get made into machines. They're taller than she is, white cabinets full of belts, gears, and openings. A lady comes by, checking things off on a clipboard. "What does it do, please?" Lily says. "It makes buttons. Celluloid goes in, buttons come out." Lily looks into one of the openings. "It doesn't make them here," the lady says. "It makes them in button factories." "Yes," Lily says. "Thank you." On the streetcar, she fingers the buttons on her shirt. They're wood, carved by Herman, and they're gray from sun and water. But she remembers celluloid ones in Berlin, bright blue and smoky tortoise. If you think about it, some of the biggest decisions in the world are made with buttons. Oliver tried to undo mine, but I made him stop. Alice wore two open this morning when she left for work. At Sunland, Frida would unsnap the brass ones on her overalls and let the top fall down when she wanted to. If someone looked too long at me in the stream, I buttoned mine all the way up for the rest of the day. All over the world, people make decisions with them. Who they love, how long to be single, whether they can pay for a baby. Emperors need sons if they're going to conquer the world, and empresses can keep their buttons closed till the conquering stops. But before any of that can happen, someone has to make the buttons, and before that, someone has to make the machines. But button machines are not Lily's destiny. She tries out for a job showing model homes in the new subdivisions that are springing up everywhere around LA. It's the beginning of all that suburban sprawl. She can't get one of those jobs till the war is over because she sounds German. But when the war ends, she goes back and tries again. The Sunday after peace is declared, she goes back to the developments. 2 weeks later, the manager at Rosewood Glen gives her a tryout. She already knows the square footages, the optional fruit trees, and the grade school principal's name, but she adds some touches of her own. And Lily thinks that she's gotten Sunland out of her system, and she gives her parents a hard time for taking her there. And yet this is the speech she makes when she shows people the houses. "You spend your days in the city, where people battle one another over everything, where it's all billboards, telegrams, and money," she tells her first audience. "But what if every night you came home to Rosewood Glen, to where you see what life really is, rest and nature and the people you belong to? Your neighbors at Rosewood Glen. It makes you happy to greet the sunrise with neighbors like these. It's so beautiful, you might paint a picture of it or write a poem. Let's go in here, please. Every house comes complete with this electric washer. It's an offbeat approach, the manager says. But in 2 months, Lily puts 5 families in houses. Before long, she's making jokes about her accent and finding separate ways to appeal to men, women, and children. Sometimes she puts on old clothes after work and helps the landscapers plant trees. Still, when the Sunday crowds go home, she feels something missing from her life. It's a real estate license, she decides, and in the spring, she starts night school. And I'm going to close with the very ending of the book. It's 1934. Lily has grown up. She's still living in L.A. And she and Gerhard and Anna and Rose are back at Sunland for the last time. Lily has her husband, Edward, and her little boy, William, with her, and everyone is saying goodbye. Rose takes Lily's hand. "You'll write?" she says. Lily looks down the path and sees her young self with bare feet and flower chains in her hair. She was so filled with shit, as the Americans say. But no, she knew something too. You can't send her away altogether. "Yes," she says. The others walk down to their cars, but Lily stands still. "Are we sleeping here?" William says. "No," Lily says, "just staying another minute." The cars drive away as a green truck comes in, full of pine saplings. The land always looked good at this hour. Orange light on the mountains and a few dark-bottomed clouds on the inland side. William's restless, but Lily tells him to wait and listen to the breeze, that it's a special one here, that if you listen to it long enough, there's music. Thank you. Thank you. So at 8 o'clock, when which is in a little while, it's not yet, but at 8 o'clock when we all come out of here, BK and I would like anyone who'd like to join us. You take a left out of the store and a left at the corner, and you look across the street, and there's a tavern called Glen Park Station, which has both real drinks and non-alcoholic drinks. And they let you bring in food from the taqueria next door, for example. So we would like you to be our guests, anyone who feels like hanging out a little more after 8. We will be there, and we would love to see you.
Maybe we should leave at 5 so we can quickly get inside Glen Park.
You're right. You're right. 5.
Market and
Oh yeah, there's a
anything to eat.
yeah. The market across the street from the bar closes at 8, so we could be a few minutes earlier.
Or quiche Loren or whatever.
Yeah, quiche Loren. So, and if anyone has any questions now, I would love to answer them. Nobody. Yes.
What did you most enjoy about writing this book?
Wow. Well, I enjoyed the thing that's also the most painful, which is finally getting these characters right. It's very hard, but it's a big kick, Apart from that, I enjoyed going to the wonderful library at Cal Berkeley and just drowning myself in this stuff from that period. In the book, Jules, the character, is a collage artist, and basically he's making the collages that Kurt Schwitter's made when they're described. And so great, I got to sit and go through all the Kurt Schwitter's, coffee table books and museum catalogs in the world that they have in Berkeley. It was sensational. And similarly, there's a scene where Rose shows her paintings to Benji. And again, it's the German Expressionists. It's George Gross and Ludwig Meidner and all these people. And, what fun. And I have the character Manfred, who is German Expressionist poet, modeled loosely on Jacob von Hodes, but also writing a little bit like George Heim. And I sat in the library and read those guys. I mean, it was college. It was great, Sure.
I'm going to pretend that I understood all the references in the previous answer. I know, I'm not sure whether it's still in the book, but I know that you created expressionist poetry for the book.
Yeah.
Did you also, were the headlines real? The headlines from Germany, were they taken from newspapers or?
Thank you for asking. Those are verbatim from the Los Angeles Times of those dates. And those were on microfiche at that same library. I mean, it just was great fun. Anytime I was able to do something verbatim like that, I did. The stuff where Leo Rosenberg is reading the election results is verbatim. I have a recording. I found a recording of it, and it's exactly what he did, and he cleared his throat, and the whole thing is great. And it's just and then the poetry I made up because it's not. It's not the real Jacob von Hodes. It's my character writing it. And that was fun, too. To write these pastiches, the song lyrics and the poems was really a pleasure.
So I read two versions of your manuscripts, the first one and the second one, and saw how it changed and kept getting better, and you added the end in the second version. But can you go through maybe how it metamorphosed, how it changed?
It was about 1 million drafts. It was many years, and it was 1 million drafts. And I think the first big thing was that Wendy Lesser said, "You cannot end in 1925. You cannot leave us hanging like that." And I extended it to 1934 after she said that. And Dr. Fred Adler here helped me so much with the Brahms Concerto. I just got so much help from people, and that's kind of the story of the revisions. There are people who don't show things, and I show things and beg for help. That's my method, right? And it's all the story of of people being nice in that way.
Was there a group like this?
Yeah. If you and I don't want to take us too deep in the wilderness here, but if you in the book there's an afterword at the end, which has the purpose of bringing in some of the reference sources and sorting out what was real from what was fictional. Gerhard, Anna, Benji, Lily Rose are fictional creations. But there was a place, there's a couple wonderful books I can recommend. There's a book called Mountain of Truth by a historian named Martin Green. He wrote a stack of books about this, but Mountain of Truth in particular is just great. And it's about the fact that around the turn of the 20th century, a renegade early psychoanalyst named Otto Gross, who had worked with both Freud and Jung and broken with them because they were too patriarchal, had a setup in Switzerland, actually, at Lake Ascona, called Monte Verita. And it was full of these people. It was a lot like the way I describe Langenhain in the book. And people were dropping by and being influenced by it. And when you think about who they were, it's not surprising. Hermann Hesse, Isadora Duncan, Franz Kafka, D.H. Lawrence and his wife Frida Lawrence, all these people, hung out. And then some people who were influenced by all this made it to California well before 1920. And it's like that photograph at the beginning of the book, Bill Pester sitting in the desert, in Palm Canyon in 1917. And there were groovy health food restaurants in LA, and there was all of Ojai, and there just was all this stuff very early. And that was my initial experience of this. Was I saw these pictures and I said, why is this 1967? Why is it 1917? And then I set about finding out. But the afterword is helpful for these references. If you want to read about a wonderful book about what this kind of life was really like in the 1960s, you can read Andy Romanoff's book called Stories I've Been Meaning to Tell You, which is just wonderful. You get the hog farm and just all this great stuff, and it's highly recommended.
There's a group here in San Francisco that was like that.
Yeah. There were people all over the places, and a couple people pointed me to books where there were these great black and white photographs from the 20s, of just one sort of desert utopia after another. And each one had a shtick, you know, we're reinterpreting the Bible, we're, you know, whatever it was. And they were all out there east of LA.
Is there anything from your life or your family's life that is in the story?
You know, I have a pretty good sense that my mother's family, before I met any of them, because I was born too late for this, but they were sort of beatniks. They were in a big house in Brooklyn, and there were a lot of anarchists and socialists and theater people, and it was one of those households. So, yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Do you think there's any connection between your movie career and the idea of this dreams in the vicinity of LA?
Oh, that's interesting. Sure. Well, I spent a lot of time around there, and I was always fascinated by the desert stuff. So yeah, I mean, I lived there for some years, and I know that area. Redlands is great. Redlands is worth a trip. It's wonderful.
I think you may have answered my question. I remember when you were early on working on it, you were reading a series of books, and I read one of them, the history. Was that Green?
Yeah, that was Martin Green. I think you read the von Richthofen sisters.
Yeah, that's right.
And Frida von Richthofen marries D.H. Lawrence, and they make it to New Mexico. They make it to Taos. And that is why certain people in my book end up in New Mexico. Don't want to say who it is. I guess that's everything. I thank you all a million, I must say. Thank you. So
I'd
if we,
like to say what the scoop is here. The book has been selling pretty well here at Beck. We don't have too many copies. There's 5 here, there's 2 on the counter, there's 3 in the window that I'll climb in and get. 8 or 10 copies. So I suggest you go, those who don't grab one now, you go down to the bar, have Charlie write out for Charlie what you want him to say, how much you want to praise him in the process. In the process of signing the book for you. And we'll get a few copies shipped to him, and he can, we'll give him addressed envelopes, and we're going to do something like that for those who don't grab a copy tonight. But there are a handful here. There's a couple here, a couple back there. So, by 8 o'clock it'd be great if you took most of the activity down the street or to, or to the back of the room. So that's mostly about buying the books. Yeah.
Does Beckett accept contributions for your fine services?
Well, we do, but of course that's just a sidelight to this. Yeah, we have a nonprofit, and it is very useful to have a donor base because, we're in 2 very profitable businesses, bookstores and concert promotion, jazz concerts especially. Although, things have been pretty good the last couple of months, and we do have a nonprofit. Right now we're using a fiscal sponsor for another week or so, but we'll get to our nonprofit Beck Cultural Legacy Project within a couple of weeks. That is now finally falling into place where it's supposed to be. But anyway, like that. But this was a wonderful book, fantastic to read, and people have been buying it up, and I wasn't paying that much attention, so I didn't lay in a whole lot more copies, but we do have some. So any final words?
thank you so much.
Oh, that's what I wanted to hear. No, thank you very, very much. A perfect evening by my count. Charlie Haas.
You can always buy Allison Ellen's book.
He's going backstage. Yeah, pick up Valentina.
Valentina's coming up from LA. It's still here? Is that on Spotify? Oh, okay.
So,
Going down to the things. Yeah, I think we can come for a little bit. Valentina's coming, flying in. We have to go up that's an obstacle now. Oh. We're kind of in Santa Rosa. Yeah. Anyway, so it's just a big night, so we might